We're proud to support the craft of journalism. UBS brings you the latest news from around the world with The Globalist on Monocle Radio. Be part of an international network that brings together leading insights, research and technology across 24 time zones and 12 key financial hubs, with you at the centre of it all. UBS. Advice is our craft.
You're listening to The Globalist, first broadcast on the 13th of August 2025 on Monocle Radio. The Globalist, in association with UBS. This is The Globalist, broadcasting to you live from Midori House in London. I'm Georgina Godwin. On the show ahead, tensions have increased between Lebanon and Iran over the disarming of Hezbollah, with Beirut caught between the demands of Washington and Tehran. We'll examine the significance of a joint UK-Japanese naval operation, and then our Chris Chermak will go through the international papers. What do you have for us, Chris?
Hello, Georgina. I'll be talking about the US Capitol under federal control and why Germany's chancellor just can't get a holiday.
Now, potential travellers from various African nations are finding it more difficult to obtain US visas, or in some case banned altogether. We'll ask why, who it's affecting, and if soon everyone will need to share their social media profiles in order to gain entry to the country. We'll hear about a potential lifeline for public broadcasters within Europe. And then
Iranian hospitality and restaurants are amazing and been amazing for the last, 10 years, because being a young democracy and young country, you need to be quick.
We'll hear about the proliferation of Ukrainian restaurants beyond the country's troubled borders. Our luxury markets editor will be here to discuss the sale of Fabergé and what this means for the storied Russian heritage brand. And we'll have a roundup of cultural news from France. That's all ahead here on The Globalist, live from London. First, a look at what else is happening in the news. South Korea's former First Lady, Kim Kyun-hee, has been arrested on graft charges, joining her jailed husband, ex-President Yoon Suk-yeol. China's military says it drove away the US destroyer USS Higgins from disputed South China Sea waters near Scarborough Shoal. And US National Guard troops have been deployed across Washington, D.C. after President Donald Trump took control of the city's police force. More on that a little bit later. Do stay tuned to Monocle Radio throughout the day. Now, on Thursday, as we reported here, the Lebanese government voted to approve a US plan to disarm the Iran-backed Shiite Muslim organisation Hezbollah, prescribed by some countries as a terrorist group. The government also said it would ensure that only the state controlled the sale of weapons. Well, this immediately caused internal pushback, and now there's a strong regional reaction too. So I'm joined by Monocle's Middle East correspondent, Leila Malala-Allen. Leila, thank you for coming on the show. Can you remind us of the US-backed proposal which was approved by the Lebanese cabinet last week?
Yes, so this suggestion has been put forward by Tom Barrack, who is one of Trump's Middle East envoys. And the suggestion essentially is that the Lebanese government must lead an initiative to have Hezbollah completely disarmed by the end of the year. Now, this was agreed in the ceasefire last November after the war in October and November between Lebanon and Israel. And that deal was brokered by the US. Now, this new government in Lebanon that's come in after 2 years without a president, without a prime minister, was in part fostered through with the help of the Americans. And they have been trying to do this already, but essentially this proposal sort of puts a deadline on that and says that the government must completely disarm Hezbollah by the end of the year and must make the Lebanese armed forces not only the most powerful military force in Lebanon, but the 6 national security forces must be the only forces that have weapons in Lebanon.
And how much influence does Hezbollah have within Lebanon, and how has the group become so well armed?
It still has a significant amount of political and social influence. So essentially, Hezbollah started, it came out of the sort of Shia liberation movement in the 70s and 80s, when the Shia in Lebanon were essentially very downtrodden. They did not have much wealth. They did not have much power. And Hezbollah was one of the groups that emerged out of that, and of course, very active in the second half of the Lebanese civil war. Now, in 1990, when the Lebanese civil war finished, Hezbollah was the only independent group, because, of course, that civil war was made up of fighting between so many different internal militias in Lebanon. In the peace deal, Hezbollah was the only one that was allowed to keep its weapons under the terms that it was still fighting Israel in the south of Lebanon on behalf of Lebanese. Now, Israel occupied Lebanon from the end of the civil war until 2000. When they pulled out in 2000, Hezbollah still refused to put down their weapons and said, it's still a risk, we're still defending the south. And that did, of course, happen in 2006. Again, there was a war with Israel. Hezbollah was much better armed than the Lebanese army and carried even more favor with a lot of the Lebanese population, because they really are the ones that won that war against Israel, the way they see it, the way they portray it, pushed Israel out in 2006. Now, there was a UN resolution in 2006 that was part of ending that war, part of making a ceasefire deal between Israel and Lebanon, 1701. And one of the main terms of that deal was that Hezbollah would pull back past the Litani River and let the Lebanese army take control of the south of Lebanon and be the main force, and that Hezbollah would give up its weapons. They never did, and it's been a major point of political contention ever since. It's raised continuous problems. There's been a lot of internal strife. There are many people who are deeply against Hezbollah having weapons. Now, in the war, they continue to be very, very strong. They're strong in the government as well, and they are a key part of the government, very powerful in the parliament, both through Hezbollah and through Amal, the other main Shia group, which is friendly to them. During the war last year, they were decimated. They lost thousands of fighters. They lost all their main leadership. They lost a huge amount of weaponry as Israel carried out those bombings. So they are significantly militarily weakened, which was then made only worse by the fall of Assad and his regime in Syria, both because Assad had been a big supporter of Hezbollah. Hezbollah fighters had actually gained a lot of experience on the ground fighting for Assad in Syria, but mainly because Syria was the main route through which Iran sent Hezbollah money and weapons. So they are considerably weaker now, but they do still wield quite a lot of political power.
Now, there's been a strong reaction from Hezbollah's Iranian backers. Do tell us about the visit to the country of the senior advisor to Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, and the message that he brings.
So Ali Larijani, he is the head of the Supreme National Security Council, so he's essentially the top defense chief in Iran. This often happens when Iranian officials make a visit. They make a visit to sort of all their allies in the region. So he's first going to Iraq to make a bilateral security agreement, and then he'll come to Lebanon. He's going to meet with Prime Minister Nawaf Salam. He's going to meet with the President, Joseph Aoun. Aoun was formerly the head of the army, so he is one of the main people sort of pushing for this disarmament and this unity of the Lebanese army. Now, unfortunately, the foreign minister, Youssef Raji, is refusing to meet with Larijani. I should point out that that's not just a general protest. In Lebanon, there is, of course, this government's made up of all the different sects to make sure that it sort of retains plurality. And the foreign minister comes from a Christian party that is violently opposed to Hezbollah. So that is why he's refusing to meet. They are all extremely frustrated because after this agreement was made, the Lebanese government has been trying very hard since it came in after the ceasefire agreement last year to slowly push towards this disarmament. But they wanted to be very careful because, of course, they don't want to create any more internal strife in the country. They have to be careful how they take steps against Hezbollah. They have been trying to seize weapons from Hezbollah fighters in the south. But they've been trying not to be too public about that and trying not to humiliate Hezbollah. This massive push from the US in order to try and push them towards doing this faster. There is frustration within the Lebanese government that they feel the US is more concerned with Israel's interests and having that disarmament happen quickly than with Lebanon's interests in trying to finally build a solid and unified government. However, they are also deeply frustrated with Iran and Iran as they see it sticking their oar in. After this announcement was made in Parliament last week, then one of the Supreme Leader of Iran's senior advisors came out and said that this was a terrible idea, that essentially Hezbollah wouldn't listen, and that they were completely against this, and it was all being done just in favor of Israel and the US. And Hezbollah itself, in response, said that they essentially would completely ignore the decision of the Lebanese government and would have nothing to do with it. So there's been an angry response from the Lebanese government saying this is interference that can't be tolerated from Iran. So the likelihood is that what these meetings are trying to do is find some sort of middle ground where Iran still feels that it is able to advise, at least if not supply, its allies in Hezbollah, and that its interests are still going to be maintained in the Lebanese government through Hezbollah, but the new government, and particularly the Prime Minister and the President, feel that they have enough freedom to move forward and try and essentially both agree to this deal, but most importantly, create Lebanese unity and empower the Lebanese army to be one army for the whole country and the most powerful military force.
I mean, it's an incredibly precarious position. Lebanon is now trying to balance Israel, Iran and the demands of Washington. How do they do that?
Well, it's something that the Lebanese are extremely experienced in. They have been trying to balance all those interests of different allies for 40 or 50 years now. And of course, that's one of the reasons why we've seen so many ups and downs in Lebanese politics, so many periods that Lebanon has gone for years without a prime minister, without a functioning government, without a president. They are finally in a position now where not only have they managed to form a government, but they have managed to form one which the people seem to have faith in, which is not made up, or at least majority not made up, of deeply corrupt people, but actually technocrats who really want the government to work and are really interested in working together. Joseph Aoun has a lot of respect as the president, of course, because he was previously in charge of the army, and so which is really the only institution in Lebanon that's seen as equally representing all different people and all different groups. So there is a huge amount of goodwill towards them and hope that this government will work. And there is goodwill towards this government from all their various allies, but they are constantly running this tightrope. As you say, they're trying. The country still officially feels it's at war with Lebanon. It feels it's at war with Israel and has been since the end of the civil war. So it's certainly not interested in appeasing Israel, but it must appease the US, its allies in the US. The French, of course, very involved in Lebanon too. They are very pro this deal going through. And the reality is they don't want to anger Iran. Iran is also another powerful backer in the region. They don't want a split in the country again of the Hezbollah to feel that they are being pushed out. For many people, they are a legitimate part of the Lebanese government, and they represent, many hundreds of thousands of people within Lebanon. So it's a constant sort of tightrope while spinning plates. That's why they'll be taking these meetings. That's why they've been taking these meetings with the US. They are such an important foothold in the Middle East for so many different countries. And for a long time, many Lebanese have simply said, please leave us alone, all these countries, and let us handle our own politics. But the reality is they're such an important territorial position, and financially they are in such trouble and have been in a crisis for years, so they do need the support of all their allies. So they are going to have to try and make this work.
Layla, thank you very much indeed. That's Monocle's Middle East correspondent, Layla Malala Allen. This is The Globalist. It's 15:13 in Tokyo, 7:13 here in London. Britain's Prince of Wales aircraft carrier has docked in Japan. It's only the second British carrier to do so since the late 1990s. It's the final leg of a months-long Indo-Pacific deployment, Operation High Mast, leading a strike group with the destroyer Dauntless and Norway's frigate Roald Amundsen. The visit follows joint F-35B operations with Japan's Kaga carrier, a first for both navies, and comes as Europe steps up its security ties with Japan amid concerns over China. Well, I'm joined now by Alessio Patalano, who's Professor at King's College London and an expert on Asian defence. Alessio joins us from Tokyo. Alessio, many thanks. Why is this port call more than just a routine stop?
That's an excellent question, and one that allows us to think about the fact that this deployment, which is the second of the last 5 years, last time was in 2021, when Carrier Strike Group led by the Queen Elizabeth during COVID, made also an important call here. But 2021 was before the war in Ukraine. It was before a significant change in the strategic conditions and circumstances across the world, because let's not forget, Russia is also a neighbor of Japan. And so if you put that on top of North Korea, which is also heavily involved in Ukraine and is getting an enormous amount of know-how and access to capabilities and knowledge from Russia and China, for Japan as well as the United Kingdom, this Carrier Strike Group deployment, it's taking place in a very different context, and therefore presents a different opportunity to articulate around this narrative of a very severely degraded international security landscape. So what you've seen in terms of these first activities, like the cross-decking from fighter jets from the British Armed Forces on Kaga, the Japanese maritime self-defense force flat top, is just one of the several examples of how we are trying to articulate a response to that increasingly severely deteriorated broader landscape.
You talk about cross-decking. That's landings and takeoffs from Japanese and British carriers. How does it improve their ability to operate in a crisis?
So that's an excellent question, again, because it really tells us about the fact that until you do something, you will never know the differences in practices, the type of challenges that you might find in operating place. We have to, for broader understanding of the audience listening in, whereas the Kaga is the flat top, one of the flat tops that is being currently converted for operating F-35Bs, which are the fighter jets that both the Royal Navy and Royal Air Force are using for their air wing, which also the Japanese have just started to take delivery of. The first 3 arrived in the last few weeks. Now, these aren't the same planes, but how you operate from one carrier to another, which are inevitably different. They've got different practices. They've got different way of operating around. You need to test it. You need to do it under different type of conditions. And that's exactly what they were doing. And that's how it makes it easier in time of crisis to operate with each other, because you know how you operate, you know how to want to make things happen because you've done that before.
And finally, Alessio, should this situation transition into a hot war, would the UK be obliged to act in defence of Japan?
Of course, it wouldn't be obliged, but what is taking place right now happens in light of a number of important developments from a diplomatic and a political perspectives between the UK and Japan. This is the first visit that is taking under the Reciprocal Access Agreement framework. It's a framework that facilitates, for example, sailors going ashore, or the spare components to be brought to Japan, and then maintenance service to British assets. It's taking place in light of the Hiroshima Accords, which were an important set of agreements between the former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and the former Prime Minister Kishida that linked the two countries in terms of a shared understanding of regional threats and how Japan and the UK would work together. But none of this is a compulsory act to work in support of each other. It just is a manifestation of agreeing on the things that worry us from a security perspective, and the things that we want do together, we can already do together, we can do better together, and the things that we want to do together, and put in place the frameworks and so that we can test them and see and how to get prepared and ready if and then that rainy day comes. And we want to make a choice to work with each other and for each other.
Alessio, thank you very much indeed. That's Alessio Patalano of King's College London, currently in Tokyo. Now, still to come on the programme.
The next lot is number 48, a superb green gold imperial Easter egg by Carl Fabergé. Enamelled in translucent green, enclosed by gold laurel.
Fabergé is under new ownership. What will this mean for the Russian heritage brand? This is The Globalist.
Craft is a matter of perspective, a unique outlook, and obsessive attention to detail. With UBS House View, you get the big picture in bite-sized articles, delivered daily and curated by over 200 globally connected, locally active analysts, all focused on identifying the latest investment opportunities and market risks to help you achieve your financial goals. UBS. Banking is our craft.
Let's continue now with today's newspapers. And joining me in the studio is Monocle's senior news editor, Chris Chermak. Good morning to you, Chris. Looking very chirpy this morning.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm trying my best. I mean, it's sunny outside, and actually when you kind of come in now in the mornings, I mean, it's light outside. What more can you want?
It makes a difference, doesn't it? Let's talk about Hungary, who are just continuously a pain in the side of Europe. Now, Orban won't sign this statement on Ukraine ahead of the Trump-Putin summit.
Well, this is a really fascinating one because the European Union is, of course, trying to interject itself into this Putin-Trump summit. And they released a statement yesterday. They're obviously going to be, this is just broken today, that they will be speaking with Trump, Zelensky, and European leaders later on today. Ahead of that, they released this statement, which was signed by 26 members of the European Union, not by Viktor Orban of Hungary. This statement kind of laid out their principles once again about Ukraine's territorial integrity, what they will and what they will not accept. Viktor Orban's statement was interesting in the sense that he sort of has released this tweet as well, basically saying, before the liberal mainstream media call me Putin's puppet, the reason that I'm doing this is because what is the point of releasing a statement for a summit to which the European Union has not been invited? The fact that the EU is on the sidelines, it just makes it worse that we're providing instructions from the bench, and he wants an EU-Russia summit. So this is what he's pushing for. In addition to that, what's interesting is, yes, European leaders will be speaking with Donald Trump today via video conference. Viktor Orban has already spoken with Trump about this meeting as well. So you see the influence that he has in this meeting as well. And this is also what's, of course, making European leaders so nervous. They don't know who Donald Trump is going to be listening to.
And of course, we know that Putin's been speaking to the leader of North Korea, so he's taking his instructions as well.
He's been getting his sides on this as well, exactly. There was a conversation between Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-il as well. So everyone is kind of jockeying for position at this point, shoring up allies. But this is the difference, right? With Trump, we don't know exactly which of those voices he's listening to. He will speak with European leaders. He'll speak with Zelensky. He's speaking with Viktor Orban as well.
Now, the EU seems to be in the habit of signing statements this week. There's a flurry of them come out, including one on Gaza. But interestingly, Germany didn't sign it.
Yes, this is very interesting. Germany has a tricky position in this. It has for a while now, but another joint statement was released. It was European leaders as well as Canada and Australia basically calling for an end to all aid restrictions coming into Gaza and calling for a ceasefire once again. This does come as there are some signs of a renewed effort towards a ceasefire being brokered now by Qatar and Egypt trying to pursue a new round of ceasefire. And so, yes, a statement by most European nations as well as Australia and Canada was signed. Germany held itself out. This has always been tricky for Germany because they see almost given Germany's history, almost its reason for existence, Staatsräson, it's called in German, is to support Israel. So they have often withheld themselves from these kinds of statements.
But of course, what Germany has done is suspend weapons deliveries to Israel, any weapons that could be used within Gaza. And in fact, this has interrupted the Chancellor's holiday.
Exactly. So Friedrich Merz announced this decision last week. It was a response to Israel saying it would expand operations into Gaza City. This was too much for the German Chancellor, who said he would suspend weapons deliveries which were started after the October 7th attacks in 2023. But because of the sensitivities here in Germany, it caused such a tumult also within his own party, within the Christian Democrats, that he was forced to come out of vacation to speak to the media. So he came out at the end of the last week on Sunday to speak to the media, to give an interview to Tagesschau, basically defending his actions and saying that this did not mean that there is a complete change in Germany's position towards Israel. And maybe you're seeing that by the fact that they've still withheld from this statement.
The article itself was very interesting in that it gave us a little rundown of how previous chancellors' holidays had been interrupted and how they sort of tended to portray themselves on holiday. This one showed that Merz was in holiday mode because his shirt had one button undone.
Exactly right. It was so interesting. This was an article on Tagesschau going through the various leaders, including Angela Merkel, of course, as well, who had her holiday interrupted by the European debt crisis way back in 2012. But all these leaders always try to show that on the one hand they can enjoy a holiday, on the other hand they bring their phones with them. They're always paying attention, and Friedrich Merz is certainly one of those. But yes, with one button undone.
Let's go to the Washington Post now. I don't think anybody can quite believe that there are tanks on the streets of the capital. Tell us more about the fact that Washington is under federal control. The National Guard have been deployed, and the mayor is calling it authoritarianism.
Well, as somebody who has, as you know, Georgina, lived in Washington, D.C. for quite a long time, it was pretty incredible to look at these scenes of the National Guard and their Humvees patrolling the streets of Washington, D.C. The Washington Post has a lot of stories, obviously, on this, but one interesting is just about the chain of command. Nobody really knows who's in charge right now. Police in D.C. don't know who they're really going to be getting their orders from. In theory, they are now under control of the Drug Enforcement Agency, the DEA. But so far, there's been no change to any of the instructions that they're receiving. So what's interesting here is there's something of a disconnect, I think, between the political optics of this, where you also have the DC's mayor, as you say, Muriel Bowser, calling this essentially a slide into authoritarianism. Trump is taking over a city. And at the same time, it seems like on the local level, though, they're all working quite well together, at least for now. There is a sort of division, even if they don't quite know who's in charge. DC police are being left to investigate crimes. The National Guard is looking after national monuments and federal buildings. And then they're working for a house of the FBI and other law enforcement agencies, Secret Services involved, the National Park Services involved, just how they can patrol the streets and how they can be involved. At the end of the day, these are all security officials who do have a mission to try and reduce crime, which is high in D.C., it must be said as well. So if there's a little bit of a silver lining, at least on the ground so far, it seems like this is working in a relatively cooperative way.
I mean, there was a very sort of a heartfelt and touching plea from one homeless charity in particular, urging people to take shelter wherever they could, saying, please just get off the streets for your own safety. We will help you, reach out to us, but please take cover, essentially.
I think this is what you're seeing both from these organizations and from the mayor of Washington, D.C. as well. She knows how difficult this position is because she doesn't really have much recourse. Donald Trump is allowed to do this, and therefore there is a sort of urging, please cooperate, don't make the situation any worse than it already is. Let's try and work with the federal government on this to show that we can have a safe city and that we can handle our own problems as well.
All right, well, let's have a lovely summer story, shall we? Not so good, though, actually, for Italy's beach clubs, because apparently they're empty.
Well, I find this story fascinating from a number of angles, Georgina, because yes, there's been the stories developing, started last week in Italian papers a little bit, that the private beaches in some of the best resorts of Italy have seen a drop in tourism of about 15 to 25 to 30%. But these are private beaches. This was then picked up by The Guardian as well over the weekend. And now sort of all of Italy this is all that anyone in Italy can talk about. I saw this in the Austrian media. Everyone is talking about, is Italy losing tourism to its beaches? Now you have the sort of counter to that. The mayors of Italy in the Amalfi Coast are out saying, no, it's not true. This is all fake news. Giorgia Meloni of Italy has gone out saying this is the opposition. They're trying to sort of attack our hospitality sector. So there is a bit of a mix here, as always. Yes, it does seem like private beaches in the Amalfi Coast and other places have suffered because people don't have as much money as they used to. Italians don't want to go and pay 90 euros for a parasol anymore per day like they used to. But other beaches are still doing well. They're going to private beaches. They're going to the mountains. So the lesson is, yes, if you want a nice holiday and you want to spend a little bit of extra money, maybe go to one of those private beaches on the Amalfi Coast. It'll be a little quieter than normal.
But I mean, if you go to, say, for instance, Forte dei Marmi, clubs like Dalmazia, it's so expensive.
It is ridiculously expensive.
It's beautiful. The service is impeccable. impeccable, but you are really, really paying top dollar when there is a free beach down the road.
Well, this is exactly what even the mayors are trying to argue. Like, well, we have our free beaches, and like they just are trying to say, well, but the service ratio to value for money is still a good one. You get what you pay for. So please do come to our beaches. This is the week, by the way, that is the highlight. It's the Ascension of Maria. This is a big holiday in Austria as well, for that matter, but in Italy. So they really, really want people to go to the beach this week of all weeks.
You have your instructions. Chris Chermak, thank you very much indeed. This is The Globalist on Monocle Radio. Now, here's what else we're keeping an eye on today. South Korea's former First Lady, Kim Kyun-hee, has been arrested after a court issued a warrant late on Tuesday over graft allegations which she denies. She's the only former First Lady in the country to be detained, joining her husband, ex-President Yoon Suk-yeol, who's in jail facing trial after his April ouster over a failed bid to impose martial law. China's military says it monitored and drove away the US destroyer USS Higgins from the waters of the disputed Scarborough Shoal in the South China Sea. The military's Southern Theatre Command said the destroyer entered the area without the approval of the Chinese government today. US National Guard troops are on the streets of Washington, D.C. after President Donald Trump deployed them and took control of the city's police force, claiming violent crime was rampant. Armoured vehicles have appeared across the capital, where officials say 800 Guard troops and 500 federal agents will be deployed, though Mayor Muriel Bowser has called the move an authoritarian push. And a Chinese man has pleaded guilty to trying to smuggle 850 protected turtles from the United States to Hong Kong. The turtles, worth about $1.4 million, were allegedly wrapped in socks and mislabelled as plastic animal toys. This is The Globalist. Stay tuned. Now for a look behind the headlines, here's Monocle's Monica Lillis on Europe's public broadcasting lifeline.
Trots att den nya coronasmittan nu definitivt har tagit sig in bland de äldre som använder sig av hemtjänst.
Public broadcasters in the EU are not immune to political pressure. All looks well when you stroll past the Swedish television and radio headquarters in Östermalm in Stockholm, but inside, the debate over the remit for public service broadcasting has been raging for years. Elsewhere, countries including Italy, Hungary and Slovakia are grappling with mounting interference that spun renowned media outlets into megaphones for politicians. The continent's broadcasting integrity has been handed a lifeline, however. The European Broadcasting Union enacted the European Media Freedom Act last week to safeguard independent and pluralistic media with stable funding, greater public visibility and blocks to political meddling. The EBU are urging member states to enforce these changes, and leaders would do well to heed its advice. Sweden's Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson has an opportunity to lead the pack. The country's public service charter is up for renewal in 2026, and some right-leaning politicians have expressed a wish to do away with the country's public broadcasters altogether. For now, it seems that they will be safe to continue airing, albeit with wing-clip budgets and trimmed staff ranks. It could soon be open season for broadcasters around Europe, but smart politicians will know that good journalism will help curtail a mounting far-right movement.
That was Monocle's Monica Lillis, and for more from Monocle's editors and correspondents around the world, do sign up for our free daily newsletter, The Monocle Minute, at monocle.com/minute. It's 8:33 in Zurich, 2:33 in Washington, D.C. Now, a group of white Afrikaners from South Africa have been welcomed into the US as refugees and given state help to re-establish themselves. It's a different story for many black African would-be travellers to the States. There have been some key US policy changes which impact on who can get a visa, and these appear to be targeted at this particular demographic, making it more difficult for people from the places Trump once termed shithole countries to visit. Well, I'm joined now by Scott Lucas, who's adjunct professor at the Clinton Institute, University College Dublin. Scott, good morning to you. Lovely to have you back on the show. Can we begin with my home country, Zimbabwe? What are the new visa regulations there?
Well, effectively, there is a suspension for the moment on getting a visa to enter the United States until Zimbabwe fulfills certain requirements demanded by the Trump administration regarding how they screen, how they review people who wish to go into America. In other words, Zimbabwe has been added to a hit list that was already established in June. In June, the Trump administration fully restricted entry into the United States by people from 12 countries. 7 of them happen to be from Africa. They partially restricted entry into the United States from another 7 countries. And Sierra Leone is amongst the African countries on that partially restricted list. Zimbabwe now joins it, at least for the near future.
And of course, another way that this is being restricted is the payment of bonds. Now, this has been brought in for Malawians and Zambians. I think it's $15,000.
And it's going to be brought in for further countries. The Trump's so-called big, beautiful bill already imposed a $250 fee just to simply apply for a visa into the United States, which is quite a hefty total. But beyond that, yes, this demand for tourists, for business people, for students to post a bond of $15,000 is being rolled out. You've mentioned 2 of the first countries, but there are going to be more on that list. I suspect that Zimbabwe could soon join it because in part, and we have to be upfront here, you have the U.S. being led by a man who has expressed racist attitudes towards Africans in the past, and because this administration is posing on the idea of being xenophobic and supposedly protecting America from all these dangerous foreigners.
There's worrying news out of Kenya too, where it's reported that visa applicants have to show 5 years of social media history when applying in-country. Tell us more about that.
Well, that actually can apply to any country, because what has happened, again, under the Trump crackdown is that when you enter the United States, they can demand to see your social media, they can't demand your passwords, but they can demand that you set all your media to public so they can review it. What they're doing now is that they're setting that up in terms of the visa screening process. It just happens to be done for Kenya, but it can be done in theory, and I think it will be rolled out from people from many countries, which is, they do this full trawl effectively of your personal life before you're even granted the visa to go to the States.
So what recourse do travellers have? And I'm thinking now, particularly when you turn up on the borders of the States, what can we do when we're asked to show our phones? Do we have to do it?
Yes, you do. I mean, you do in the sense that if you don't, you can be denied entry. And it's as simple as that. And I have to emphasize, although we're focusing on Africa here, it doesn't matter where you're traveling from. You could face that situation. So the recourse that you have is actually to determine how much information you want to carry with you into the United States. That decision I faced back in May when I went to visit my mother, even though I'm a U.S. citizen, because colleagues from the UK and from Ireland were being interrogated as they tried to go into the United States. And the advice at that point was, if you don't want that, then scrub your social media, delete it from your phones, or carry a burner phone into the States.
Scott, could you imagine us having this conversation even a year ago?
Of course, we couldn't have this conversation a year ago. A year ago, the United States was being ruled by an administration where you could debate its policies, but it respected rights, it respected decency, it respected tolerance. You're talking about an invasion of privacy, which is fairly extensive for those who are non-U.S. citizens. But remember, this is happening for those who are legally resident in the United States or U.S. citizens right now as well. That there is just this crackdown on your personal life with the belief that the Trump administration doesn't have to observe constitutional or legal regulations. So it's a scary time in terms of the fact that this is an administration, and let's just put this out there, it seeks to be authoritarian, which means it wants to control people's lives, whether they're in the United States or whether they're just coming to visit.
There goes my visa. Thanks, Scott. Scott Lucas of University College Dublin there. You're with Monocle Radio. entrepreneur Sergei Mosanov has bought luxury brand Fabergé for $50 million. It's a new chapter for the jewelled egg maker with deep Russian imperial roots. Well, joining me here in the studio is Brenda Toohey, who's Monocle's luxury markets editor. Good morning to you, Brenda.
Good morning.
Suitably luxurious. Gosh, that's a very
trying hard.
Beautiful bracelet there too. Yeah, so much of luxury is about doing your ironing properly, isn't it? Look at you.
I'm not so good at that, though.
You look crisp, though. Listen, what does this takeover mean for Fabergé's future and also its heritage? I mean, it's a very storied brand.
I mean, I think what it means is security, clarity, momentum, discipline. SMG Capital and Sergei have purchased this. And I think its future is very secure and strong. Now, we have to also remember that Fabergé was sold to Gemfields in 2013 for $142 million, and Sergei Mosanov has bought it for $50 million. So he's got quite a deal there going, okay?
Yeah. Why did Gemfields sell?
Gemfields sold. They've really got themselves into a bit of trouble. There's some political unrest in Mozambique where they mine rubies, and in Zambia where they have K-gem mines where they mine for emeralds. There are a lot of inferior emeralds flooding the market. I think they just need to hunker down and refocus. They needed some capital. They had quite significant losses in the last 2 years. And I read that they needed to raise $30 million. Well, now they've raised $45 million and another $5 million will come their way quarterly in royalties. So they've done that. So their future should be secure too. And they can focus on what they do, mining gemstones.
I wonder if this sale of Fabergé, though, points to wider trouble in the luxury market.
I don't think that this sale signifies that. I think that Fabergé, it is a heritage brand. It's not a flashy brand. You know, it's a brand for those who know, who are in the know. It's a chic, sophisticated brand, you know, famed for their wonderful eggs with the little surprise inside. So it's a brand who now has a very secure future, and a brand I think that always sells well, both in the primary and secondary markets, I might add.
Well, just unpack that for me, because who's buying Fabergé eggs these days, and do they have a big resale value?
They do have a very good resale value. Perhaps people that are James Bond fans might be buying them right now because there's a Fabergé X007 collaboration, which looks, of course, it looks just like a Fabergé egg. It's quaint, it's exquisite, and then you open it up inside and there's a big, stomping ruby or whatever. So they can appeal to all kinds of people with a lot of money, I might add. In the secondary market, because they are so exquisitely executed with their guilloche enamel, etc., and, a smattering of lovely gemstones, they always sell well. They're a classy act, Fabergé.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, given the company's history with fabulously wealthy Russians, is this a return to its origins, but just now with kind of new tech money and not old royalty?
I think perhaps it could be. I mean, in 1917, when we had the Russian Revolution, Fabergé, the company was nationalized, and Paul Gustave Fabergé, the son of the original Fabergé owner, moved everything to Paris and reawakened the charm of Fabergé. So, I think this could be, back to basics. And what they've been doing all along, they haven't strayed too far.
And finally, does Sergei have a vision? But where is he going to take it?
I think Sergei's vision, really, I'm sure that there must be some sort of personal love of this, originally a Russian brand. I think his vision will be just to keep it to its roots. They do wonderful charm bracelets. They do fabulous rings. There's an octopusy ring right now that is really quite out of this world. So I think he will keep it. There are things that you can purchase that are entry level, and I think that he will really establish once more the great, very high-level, high jewels that Fabergé are known for.
Brenda, thank you very much indeed. That's Brenda Toohey, who's Monocle's luxury markets editor, and this is The Globalist on Monocle Radio.
There's a craft to every question, which is why at UBS, we query every aspect of the market. Working with specialized experts and award-winning research teams, covering over 3,500 stocks in 50 countries, all delivered in a comprehensive library, answering what you want with what you need. UBS. Banking is our craft.
Talks of a summit between Trump and Putin and the future of Ukraine's war may be dominating the headlines, but the past 3 years has seen a surge in interest in Ukraine's soft power too, particularly through the medium of food. New Ukrainian establishments are popping up in a number of global capitals, and here in London, a new wave of restaurants is championing Kyiv's gastronomy and resilience. One of these new openings is Tata Bunar, named after the city of Tata Bunari in the country's southern region of Odessa Oblast. It's the brainchild of Ukrainian restaurateurs Alex Cooper and Anna Adrienko. Well, earlier, Anna joined Monocle's Chiara Ramella to discuss why the UK capital was the obvious choice to set up, what the culinary scene in their homeland is like now, and the vast regionality of Ukrainian cuisine.
There are two partners at this restaurant, me and Alex Cooper. So I was already here. And I was looking for a site, and I was thinking again, what can I do in terms of contributing to the community and doing something in food in here? And his journey was completely different because he stayed in Ukraine while a lot of people left, and he expanded. They opened 10 restaurants during the full-scale invasion. I would say he was exploring the food and exploring like who we are as a nation, where we are now, and what can we offer in terms of food within Ukrainian context. And then it kind of clicked that with his background and his vision and me being here, that was the obvious choice. But we never had this conversation like, should we do, I don't know, Paris, New York or London? That never was an issue. And again, for me, the level of support, I ended up here because English, and I do want to learn another language. That's the one thing. And again, I feel that I belong, and I feel that's the multinational community, and I can contribute in here.
I think it's interesting that, for example, with the magazine that I also commissioned stories for, just before the full-scale invasion, we were planning like an amazing feature on Kyiv, on all of the incredible restaurants that are opening, the creatives that really make it an incredible city. And I feel like because of the invasion, people have started kind of gone back to looking at Ukraine like a country that is now defined by the current affairs situation. But there's obviously so much happening, and the fact that 10 new restaurants opened even during the full-scale invasion gives you obviously gives us a sense of how much there is this vitality in the country as well. So how do you feel everything is carrying on in the background, even as the obvious current affairs situation is carrying on?
I would say Ukrainian hospitality and restaurants are amazing and been amazing for the last, 10 years, because being a young democracy and young country, you need to be quick. So many chefs, so many restaurants, so many conceptual, amazing places. We had this dream of, being the part of Michelin-starred community, and that Michelin would ever come to Ukraine, and I thought that might happen 4 years ago. We had these thoughts. For now, I don't think that's possible, but again, so much to offer, and we understand that less people are traveling to Ukraine now as a tourist. That's obvious. And what you told about the concept that war changed the perception, I think it did. And I think that's because of the news, because when you go to news and you see just bombing and people suffering and ruins of buildings, you don't think about having a dinner, do you? So I think that's something that people say, but we have both. We still need to go on living, and we have this amazing restaurant and some amazing chefs and concepts.
Is there an appetite for eating Ukrainian food in Ukraine, or do people feel like they want to discover cuisines from other places? I feel like every country at some point gets to a reckoning where they either have an appetite for a modernized version of their own food and a reappreciation, and what also that means for identity for sure, or is there a sort of a hankering for food that comes from elsewhere?
That's absolutely true with Ukrainians. We have this habit, and we have the history cooking at home, because I've never seen the nation who cooks at home more than Ukrainian does. And then it's kind of comparison. Okay, I can go to the restaurant, try Ukrainian food. My mother, my grandmother, I don't know, I'm doing that better. And in terms of going out, people would rather go for Italian or Thai or whatever. Making Ukrainian cuisine and Ukrainian restaurants in Ukraine is kind of harder than making it abroad. But again, that's a strong culinary tradition, so we're cooking a lot and we just need to showcase that.
I'm interested in, as you say, the country is a huge, actually, geographically and in variety. And the restaurant here in London is called specifically after a geographical place. Yeah. I wondered whether you could give us a sense of how different the cuisine in the south of the country and around Tatabunari is compared to perhaps other regions, and what can we expect in terms of the specificities of the regionality of it?
Mm-hmm. I would say geography and terroir, first of all, because that's a south and that's a sea and that's a shore that's completely different region. And me, growing up in Kiev, I never heard half of the dishes of the menu. So like Alex walked me through the menu and I was like, I need to Google. Because again, huge country and I never heard the names. And now we have guests coming from, I don't know, Canada or US or Australia saying like, okay, I'm Jewish and I grew up in Odessa region. And I remember like 50 years ago, my mom did the same dish. That's an amazing culture, an amazing part, geographical part where food is completely different. The way borscht, the hot beetroot soup, which is traditional Ukrainian in every region and in every family, we do it differently. My mom never did borscht like we're doing at the restaurant because that's a southern Ukrainian borscht. And guests telling me that like from that region, let's say if they grew up in Odessa or around or whatever, that they're just saying that that's the exact borscht that they have.
How much sense of responsibility do you feel towards representing the country when you are essentially one of the few Ukrainian restaurants operating in London and certainly unique in the type of style that you're presenting?
Plenty of responsibility, but what I like about that and about how Alex created the concept, we have the whale as the logo. And when I asked him why that's a whale, he explained me that sometimes you need to look at your reflection in a clear water to understand who we truly are. And what we're doing, just reflection, we don't know if it's right. We don't know if that's the Ukraine we need to show, but that's the Ukraine we came up with, being outside of Ukraine. And that gives me comfort. That's, just one way to look at things.
Anna Adrienko of London's Tatabunari there, speaking to Monocle's Chiara Romella. This is The Globalist. Time now for a roundup of cultural news from France. And for that, I'm joined now in the studio by Monocle writer Claudia Jacob. Bonjour, Claudia.
Good morning, Georgina.
Now, France is the most visited country in the world. I understand more than 100 million people were there in 2024. So why no backlash? Because in other places where there's lots of tourism, the locals hate it and they're fighting back. France isn't doing that and they're famously bad-tempered.
I know, shocker. So no protest this time round. In Greece, we've seen locals spraying graffiti. In Italy, Portugal, Spain, there have been mass protests. And I think there's becoming a bit of an over-reliance maybe on some of these cities for the economic benefits of tourism, and the rapidly changing climatic conditions mean that tourism trends are maybe changing a bit more rapidly than some of these cities can prepare for. But France, on the other hand, it has a really strong historical legacy of tourism, and the country perhaps is better prepared to cope with the influx, particularly post-Olympics, which has been huge. And there's no single reason really why. There's no easy way to pinpoint it, and indeed there's no saying that it won't happen in the future. But I think France, the government has really invested in mid-sized cities, not just in the capital, and has nudged visitors beyond sort of the classic tourist train, beyond Paris, beyond Nice, beyond Marseille, and beyond the usual seasons as well.
I want to talk now a little bit about Denmark, but this does concern France, French tapestry specifically.
That's right. The new Carlsberg Foundation, which is a Danish arts foundation, has commissioned Danish artists to design 16 tapestries for a royal residence, but they've been made in Paris in the textile workshops, which form part of what's known as the Mobilier National. If you haven't heard of that, it's the custodian of France's sort of most precious heritage pieces. It's a bit of a sort of self-indulgent story from me, because I actually reported on the Mobilier National Nationale last year in Paris for our culture section, and it is truly a treasure trove of goodies. You wouldn't know what lies behind those walls, but you go in and you see, Napoleon's thrones and, an armchair commission for Pompidou and tapestries by Le Corbusier. It's a treasure trove, and they've made these beautiful tapestries for a Danish residence, and it's great to see France's know-how really being recognised beyond the borders.
And we think of tapestry as this ancient art and that most tapestries are really old, but the fact is they are still being made today.
That's exactly it. That's what the Mobilier National wants to promote. It's been recognised as a intangible cultural heritage by UNESCO since 2009, the tapestry making art. And indeed, they made a beautiful tapestry with an Iranian artist for the Paris Olympics last year. So I think their sort of goal is to really promote tapestry making as an art that can actually be transferred to the modern day, and it's being recognised abroad. And when actually, the Danes have their own prowess of design, and but they recognise France's abilities. And
now let's have a look at an entire museum dedicated just to language.
That's right. It actually opened 18 months ago. It's called the Cité Internationale de la Langue Française, and it's 50 minutes north of Paris. It's France's first cultural venue dedicated entirely to the French language. It was established as a means of promoting French as a global language, and not just in France, but in la francophonie. So encompassing all the French speakers worldwide in whatever capacity that might be. I think, it's not a new museum, but Le Figaro has reported that in the 18 months that it's been open, there's been a bit of criticism about it, whether it maybe has enough sort of substance. It has a lot of tech going on, and people feel it maybe undermines sort of what the roots of the French language really are, and a lack of content. But I think for me, what's interesting is that it's, the government was prepared to spend 234 million euros on a 4-year restoration of this chateau, this Renaissance chateau. It's an amount that's second only to the renovation of Notre Dame, and it really shows a determination to honour and protect the French language in an era of globalisation.
And we do see that across other institutes in France too. But how do you show a language? What is a physical? What would be in the exhibition?
Well, I think that's the issue, is that people are saying, how can you sort of encapsulate, centuries of a French language into one gallery, into one museum? But I think it shows. I think it's more what it shows, what the gallery shows. I think it's France has taken a pretty tough stance towards Anglicisms creeping in. The Académie Française maintains and protects its use, and so through various exhibitions and historical artifacts, you can sort of walk through this museum and have a real appreciation for how France has tried to protect its language, which has been tricky. The Olympics were a very bilingual games, and they have quite strict laws actually about using Anglicisms in French government documents. But this chateau, which is where actually they signed the decree that French would become the official administrative language. I think you can really feel that when you're in the building. You can feel the grandeur of the French language and what it really represents for France as a country. It's a big source of patriotism.
We started by saying that French are famously cross, that they do get very cross about language, but some words have crept in anyway. I'm trying to think of examples. Le weekend.
Yeah, Le Weekend, they use a lot of, in tech and video gaming, they use a lot. They say, I find it quite funny, they say hello when they greet you. There's no bonjour with hello. And interestingly, they don't use the word RSVP, which I found quite funny. When I used to live in Paris, I once said, I'll RSVP, and someone looked at me as if to be like, sorry, what? And I was like, is this not and I was like, no, we say RSVP. She was like, I've never heard of that.
So and yes, it's French. That's hilarious.
It's interesting how people, how they transport it among, how they switch between English and French, and what actually constitutes French and what we've just invented as being French. So it's quite interesting.
Extraordinary. Claudia, thank you very much indeed. That's Claudia Jacob. So c'est fini. It's time for us to go. That's all for today's programme. Thanks to our producers, Monica Lillis and Chris Chermack, and our researcher, Henry King. Our studio manager today was Elliot Greenfield, with editing assistance from Hunter Wang. After the headlines, there's more music on the way. The briefing is live at midday in London. I'm heading off to Edinburgh today, and I'll be bringing you dispatches from the fantastic Edinburgh festivals, the literary, the art, the fringe and the theatre festivals, all coming from the heart of Scotland. The Globalists will return at the same time tomorrow. I'm Georgina Godwin. Thank you for listening.